Dr. Lisa Strohman, welcome to the Family IT Guy podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So excited to talk to you today. I've heard your name a million times, and I've been looking forward to get to have a conversation. And I really want to pick your brain and hear about some of your work experience and your background. And maybe we can start off, if you don't mind, telling us a bit about what you do and where you come from, and because you've got an impressive resume, and I think it'd be worthwhile covering some of it.
Sure. So I really started out as a psychology major, UC Davis, thought I wanted to go into kind of guardian ad litem and represent kids that needed help. I grew up under some pretty difficult circumstances, and I was like, there was somebody there for me, and I want to go do that for others, which led me into a JD PhD program. No one in my family had gone over to grad school. And so for me, it was like, I guess the ignorance of not knowing what I was signing up for. But it was so exciting. I love to learn. I still to this day love to learn. And when I was there, applied, got an internship with the FBI. And that's kind of where I say history was made for me, was working in homicidal pedophilia with the profiling unit. And I did 0 to 1 years of age. They asked me to come on as a visiting scholar and do research on the abduction profile. And I was there in Quantico, living in the dorms, happily doing the research. And then Columbine happened. So it just shifted everything for me. It was like, at one point we were worried about like vans coming and picking up children and the abduction that was occurring. And then when that incident happened, it was the digital nature of what kids were going to say and do and share online. And that's really where I started paying attention and noticing that we really couldn't keep track of the bad guys in the same way. And so I've spent the better half of the last 30 years working on that.
My goodness. I mean, the Columbine thing, what an interesting, earliest peek into how minds can get messed with by being influenced by strangers from far away over what was just the beginnings of the internet at that, because that was 1999, right?
Correct. Right. And I think what we learned from that and the lessons is that, we have now over 800,000 Columbiners, if you want to call them that, but like kids that follow the ideology and really idolize the mantra that Eric Harris put out there. And so every single school shooting from that point forward in any of those campuses, those schools were torn down, that renamed, taken away, because we didn't recognize, right, that psychology of like how it'll perpetuate in future generations and all of the things that happen post event as well.
800,000 kids. I mean,
yeah,
that I would not have expected that. I guess it wouldn't surprise me too much if you said that some people, a handful of people, but wow, that's
there's celestial
really
weddings.
Deal.
Yeah, like kids that are they call them celestial weddings, and they marry the ghost of the shooters. It's a very nefarious, dark world, and
whoa,
yeah, it's pretty in depth, and it's pretty deep, and again, I've spent my career like trying to bring rainbows and sunshine into the dark nethers of that space and pull the kids out of it if I possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, that's really great what you were saying about wanting to be there to help people in the way that you've received help when you were young. It's a very special thing, and it's what a lovely thing to do. I mean, and then to go and get 2 doctorates. I mean, no big deal. Just I'm sure that was no small effort. I mean,
I did it at the same time. It's fine.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and so have you seen? So let me do some math here. So it's 2020. Okay. So it's been 27 years, 27 years since the Columbine thing. Does any of that carry over? Was that the beginning of the peak into what kids are going through now, or is it a different ordeal because of the algorithms and stuff?
I think it's different. I mean, you have to remember during Columbine, there was no social media, so to speak, right? Like MySpace had just started beginning, but we didn't have all of these different programs and platforms that the kids are on now. And it's changed things fundamentally. There's CDC data that you can look at, that you can see the spikes of self-harm and suicidal thinking and all of that occurred post release of those platforms into the hands of our children, into society in general. And so it's a different psychology, and it's one that's getting worse and not better. And so that's really kind of what I've spent my time doing, is like trying to educate the families, the parents, the adults that are in places that can influence these kids on what really matters, and how do we kind of untether that part so that we can save as many kids as we can.
What's your perspective on the okay, so so just to like frame, here's where we line up on thinking and stuff. So we have this, like you mentioned, the suicidal tendencies, even the instance of suicides themselves have gone way up. Like I found data through the World Health Organization that shows that 10 to 14-year-olds, suicide rates tripled from 2007 to 2019, which is like now it's like 1 in 5 deaths that occur are self-inflicted amongst children. And similar, to what you're saying, like correlated with these release of these social media platforms. So when I think about the reason I do this podcast, my theme here, the theme of the podcast is, in my mind, how do we set kids up for success? Like that's kind of the underlying theme for me of everybody that I talk to. So with that theme in mind, what's your view of the problem space? What are the biggest problems? Because you have a very unique perspective here, going back to the Columbine thing and even just working for the FBI and that type of focus with kids getting hurt. Yeah, what's your view on what is the problem now? And then let's dig into that a little bit, and then eventually talk about like what do we do about it?
Honestly, I think that the biggest problem is the fact that we are giving false narratives to families. I think, and I can send some of the graphs with you if you want to throw them up to show, but like if you look at the developmental process of kids, there's all of these different like psychosocial steps that they have to go through. So imagine in elementary school as a kid, you're really trying to identify, am I good or not? You're supposed to run fast and break things. You're supposed to like try things and make mistakes and get corrected for those. Now overlay in the United States, the average child has their first device by the age of 6. Overlay the fact that the first child in the United States at the age of 8 witnesses their first pornography, and chronic viewing of that pornography begins at 11. So you're looking at these elementary school aged kids, and we're amassing data and content that is detrimental to their development just naturally. And then if they're supposed to go into middle school, they're supposed to learn who they are as a person, right? How do they learn how to trust others and like define themselves against others? So, what you and I may have grown up, trying to figure out, like, if we're not part of the jock group, are we part of the cool kids? Are we part of the nerds or drama club or whatever our cohort was? Imagine that now on a, 5 billion person platform, that as a kid, you're trying to figure out who you are. And there's so many people telling you that you're supposed to look a certain way or act a certain way. And so you're not naturally getting the feedback and going through those stages at the right times. And really what we're being told as parents of that is that the industry themselves are like, we're putting protections in place. Your kids are going to be okay. When the absolutely the truth is that they're not. They're putting up kind of false narratives that they're trying their best, when in reality we know that they're not doing their best. And so those kids are failing. So that's, if I wanted to nutshell it, it's like developmentally our kids are being, they're being handed a device that's more dangerous than a gun. And they're told that it's safe because we're all carrying it around, and they're watching us as adults and saying, what's the big deal? Everybody has one, right? Whereas if a gun is sitting on the table, the kids know to be careful of it. And that to me is probably the epitome of it. It's the cell phone to me is more dangerous than any weapon that you could put in your child's hands, because you have no control over the content, the information, and what they can do on that. And that's the part that I
Mm.
think we need to share with families and to the kids themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it. The I like to look at it too as like with any powerful tool, you have the potential for positivity, the potential for negativity. And at the end of the day, if you're exposed to a certain tool, you have a bunch of experience with a certain tool, you can kind of figure like there's a net positive or a net negative. And the whole algorithm space, all the social media apps that have these kids thinking that like, oh, I'm supposed to be like this and I'm supposed to be like that. And I'm supposed to be, my body is supposed to look that way or that way. It's to me, the sum is a net negative. I mean, it's like, are there positives? Sure. But like overall, what's the sum, my take is it's a net negative.
Well, and we're not taking into an account that human to human contact is really what builds ourselves in society together. And so the more we disconnect that, the further apart we get, the less we have what the hormone called oxytocin in our system, the less empathy, the less compassion we have for one another. And so it's not just a training ground of like bad behavior. It's also impacting us neurochemically, neurostructurally. Like we know that it's causing shifts in our developing brains, that is not helping society as a whole.
Yeah. I think 10, 20, 30 years out, and I'm always wondering, what's it going to be like? And I have optimism because I think people are coming around to seeing, okay, there's some problems here that we should address. And as parents, what examples are we setting? And
Mm-hmm.
what's our relationship with technology? You mentioned the meta thing. I saw when I was looking at your background that you worked on the case against Meta with the state of New Mexico. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So for one of the law firms, I've been in-house counsel and have like helped kind of educate the attorneys on what the psychological and physical harms that are impacting our children based on use. And also in that New Mexico case, really talk through kind of the present harm that the platforms continue to do in not banning or creating geofencing around school campuses, because it's very simple for them to just geofence a school address, and therefore the platform would like turn off while the kids are in the school, and they refuse to do that. So
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
I never considered that angle. That's a good idea. Now, I'm particularly fascinated when it comes to litigation, and especially in really big cases. Like I'd imagine you have to be airtight. Like if you're going to bring a piece of evidence, it's got to be useful. What did you learn? What evidence was brought that you found to be objectively accurate in that case? Like what did you find in what Meta was really knowingly doing?
So, on the things that I can speak to, Meta knowingly created a research division. They knowingly did research to identify whether or not their products were bringing harm, and they knowingly shut down said research when it came back negative to their platform. They've tried to hide that research, which has gotten them into trouble as of late. They've also had a multitude of cases where you can identify that, but for the time on the platform. And this is where it gets really tricky. Children don't come in, living in a white box, and then they've only been on your platform and they don't have other life stressors like family divorce or other situations that have happened to them. But there's a multitude of cases where you can identify and see, and I would have your users look at the Molly Russell case specifically out of the UK, whereby you were able to mirror the content that she was actually sharing on the platform, and how that content started algorithmically sending her more and more dark, depressive content, which was reflected then into her personal diary, which was then obviously and ended in her life a very short period later. So that is
Wow.
probably the most clear cut case that I would say that we've seen. And that's why it was so strongly litigated over in the UK, and why their laws are so much stronger than we have over here. But there's a ton of cases that show that the content that a child is putting in, and if we understand, and you understand how AI and the algorithms work, it is built to follow what the person is putting in. And so if you have a melancholy teenager or someone who is sad or frustrated or upset, it's going to inflame that emotion, and it's going to take that into darker places. And it's led a lot of kids to take their own lives. And it's hard for me to sit on the sideline and not do something about it, knowing that I see children and families that have lost kids based on their usage of their platforms.
Yeah, because you have a clinical practice, right? So you're
I do.
still involved in the day to day with what families are going through. So you're speaking from current experience as well as all of your historical experience.
Absolutely. So it isn't just the research. And I think that it's important for me to share with anyone that I can share that with, is it's like, this isn't about the numbers, and it's not about the statistics, although those are massively helpful in lawsuits and things like that. It is the stories of each child and their need to have their own stories told, because we are decimating a generation. And what I go out and advocate and tell the kids is that you are the most powerful cohort in history from a technological perspective, and you have been convinced that you have no rights and you have no privacy, and that you have to follow the algorithms that they have set up for you. And it's truly sad to me that we can't educate people fast enough to let them know that no, there's other countries like Australia and the UK and Finland that are doing things different than we are. And we just have to be able to come together and say enough is enough.
Yeah. Yeah. This episode of the Family IT Guy podcast is sponsored by me. iPhone parental controls are notoriously difficult to set up correctly. When parental controls are too complicated, parents give up. And when parents don't use the tools, children pay the price. So I created a step-by-step guide that shows you exactly how to set up an iPhone to protect your child from addiction and from predators. You can disable the internet, disable the app store, and disable the camera. You can make the screen black and white so that the iPhone becomes a tool instead of a toy. You will have confidence and peace of mind, and your child can be protected from the most dangerous parts of the internet. Go to familyitguy.com to learn more. And I feel like 2026, there's something in my gut that tells me that there's going to be a positive change in that regard. I think there's this groundswell, and it's been building. It will continue to build, and I think 2026 is going to be a good year for that.
Yeah.
Spreading good news and good information, and helping people realize that. I don't know. For me, I think about, I don't want to be normal. I don't want to be normal. I don't want my kid to be normal. I don't want my family to be normal. I don't want to ride in the middle of the bell curve. I want to ride on the right side of the bell curve. I want my kid to be on the right side of the bell curve. And normal is, by definition, that's like what's everybody else is doing, and it's the path of least resistance. It's taking things for granted, which, fair enough. This is all new stuff, right? Like all these new technologies that are attacking us through our eyeballs. Mm-hmm. We don't know how to do this. Our DNA has no encoding of how to deal with, digital attackers from far away that are invisible, so here we are trying to wade through all this craziness. But I think that's part of the positivity I feel, is that I think less people are realizing that, like, oh shoot, maybe I am taking that for granted. What happens if I don't?
Well,
what happens if I start saying no?
Yeah. And I think, to your point, I think I'm very optimistic. And I think one of the things that we've done through this program that I created was create a technology leadership council that that kids are in charge of. So how do I get Gen Z involved of like not just listening to us as adults saying, here's what it is. It's like I used to go out, talk in front of thousands of kids, and I'd say, how many of you have younger siblings? And they'd raise their hands. I'd say, keep your hands up. How many of you want your younger siblings to be on these platforms? And like, hand to God, not one of those children kept their hands up in 10 years,
Oh,
10 years. And I thought, that's powerful. It's powerful because it means that they know and they don't know what to do with it. So how do we create a platform? And that's what we did. We created a platform and we gave them the keys to the kingdom to be able to say, like, create a campaign. And so an example was I went into a school in California, an all girls school. I talked to them about the neuroscience and the neurostructural damage and the terms of the agreement that they, I took the legalese of like what Snapchat and TikTok and all of these like platforms that they were using actually made them agree to. And I had the headmaster call me up a few months later and they're like, she said, they actually listened to you. And out of 680 kids, over 400 of them on Valentine's Day deleted their account and said, we love ourselves more than your platform, and sent a huge message, from
what?
their
No
school.
way.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was such a proud moment. And I was like, okay, like, let's do this in a national, international way.
Yeah.
How do we give them the power to go and do these campaigns and really have voice in the space? And so I'm super excited to help kids do that every day.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really spectacular. Nice work.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, the kids
I
did it,
mean,
right? But it
yeah.
shows you the power of knowledge and not overlooking the fact that they are critical thinkers, and we can use technology for good, right? We can
Yeah.
understand balance and we can give them the understanding to use it in the way that is proper, and with the right keys and information, they can take it so far. So I'm so proud of them.
Wow, beautiful. And to value, I love myself more than I love, this app or this, whatever is
Yeah.
that strikes at the core. I mean, that's that's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Man, sometimes people ask me, I've never actually spoken to kids as a group directly, like at a school or whatever. I often end up speaking to parents. People ask me sometimes if, hey, will you come speak to our kids? And of course, but then I think to myself, like, what, how am I, I'm this like slow talking nerdy guy. Like I'm going to put them all to sleep before they, they start rallying and deleting their apps, I'll have to take a page from your book or something, but
Well, I do
that's
say
cool.
sometimes, yeah, when you talk to kids, it's a little bit like being on a surfboard on lava. Like you got to really watch yourself. So, depends on where you are, but you really definitely have to be on your
Yeah.
on your
So,
best. Yeah.
okay. So speaking of kids, so how do you go about teaching kids to tell the difference between like healthy tech and harmful tech? How have you succeeded in doing that?
Well, I talk to them. My saying is always tech as a tool, not as a toy, that those are two different
Okay.
things. And I talk a little bit about kind of the my plate now. It used to be the pyramid, but kind of like the food diet that you need to have like a digital diet where you really recognize that there is some great use for technology. I mean, you and I are in different states. We're doing this talk. Like you're going to be able to broadcast this to millions of people. Like I mean, that's tech as a tool, right? We're using it for good to spread information. But tech as a toy, as in like social media or gaming or any of those things that like isn't creating something critical thinking skills that's independent of you just kind of absorbing content and filtering through things. Those are different uses, and so I really just like dive into and like give them examples on both sides of that. And really, I think to me, the most important part is understanding like the connection with our teachers and people in real life. That by far is the difference that we see if you look back historically on learning and brain development and IQ. There's a correlation that you see. The more time a child is behind a screen, the less learning that happens and the less cognitive development that occurs. So we've got to tell them that. And I think that when we tell them that, they listen and they want to do something different with their own brains.
Love that. I with every day that passes, I find myself saying the same thing. Is like every time I interact with any kid, 10, 3, 1, I'm like, man, they're so much smarter than I thought. Like, I'm, sorry, young people out there for, taking you for granted perhaps, but man, the kid, yeah, I mean, it's, you can dive into some pretty complex stuff with pretty young children and they really get it. I mean, speaking of talking to kids, like I make a lot of videos where in my mind, my audience is parents. And so I speak accordingly. And I had a bunch of parents tell me like, oh yeah, I showed your video to my 7-year-old and now they don't want to play Roblox anymore. It's like, oh shoot. Okay, cool.
Right.
so,
That's awesome.
so just talk to them and tell them what's going on is the,
Yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
fill them in.
and it's just,
like, hey.
yeah, and using the language that they need. And I think that particularly when you go through and highlight, hey, here's the terms of service that you agree to, you're giving a, worldwide, global, royalty-free license to these people to use your content for the rest of your life. It's perpetual. So you're never going to like get it back. And by the way, they also said, if you want to delete it, you can, but if you've actually shared any content, then it won't ever get deleted. So, I kind of flip it on him. I was like, they clearly think that you're idiots. They clearly think that you're not going to understand these terms. And then kids get really frustrated with that. And they're like, you're right. Like they do think that yeah. So anyway, it's just like breaking it down for them and like simplifying it into like their terms and saying, nobody's going to read 32 pages of a privacy policy on a platform, except for maybe me. So I can break it down for them.
Right. One of the few. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because, and then I'd imagine too, then you have the opportunity to explain it. By the way, this is what this means. Like, this is why the concept of privacy. What does privacy mean? Why do you want privacy? Because everybody defaults like, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't have to focus on privacy. And I love that, like getting to just introduce these concepts and say like, so if you look at it, if you value privacy and then you read the terms, kind of at odds with each other. So, right. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so you talk a lot of, in your work, from what I understand, you talk a lot about the impacts on girls, and you've mentioned some of that already. And so how can parents keep an eye out? So let's say my son is 10, but let's say I had a 13-year-old daughter. 14-year-old daughter, 15, and you mentioned, melancholy in high school, teenage years, all these things, hormone changes. What do I look out for that tells me that like, oh, maybe the technology in her life is impacting her in a negative way, separate from just being a teenager? Like, what do I look out for?
Super hard question. I get it everywhere I go, because you're right. Like about those middle school age years, 12, 13, 14, you've got hormones that come on board. So you're already going to have kind of mood issues with our teenage, particularly our girls. But what I would say is like, we naturally as children are social beings. So if you start to see your child like isolate more into their room, into their bathroom, they want to be on the device more than they do want to go hang out with their friends, like that, those behaviors are not normative. And I think that a lot of times our parents are like, well, these kids just love to be on their platforms and they love to like, FaceTime each other or snap each other. And that's just like what this new generation is doing. I would say push against that, like push back on that, because it's not what creates healthy teenage years. And if they're starting to do that more and more, then to me, those are signs and indicators that whatever that content that's coming through or information that's coming through, whether it be from friends or whether it be from strangers that they've connected to online, it's something that probably is creating some level of harm or some level of hurt to them. And that's where I would say that's the biggest sign.
So would it be fair to say, like as a tactic, for example, so first, okay, so I notice, hey, my daughter is, she used to spend, an hour in her room and every night, and after dinner, now it's like 3. She never comes out of her room anymore.
Yeah.
Should I go look at her screen time report, and see like a change over time? Like, oh, she's actually, been buried in an algorithm and is in her room, having her brain traumatized by this stuff? Like, do you think that's a good like tactical approach in order to see, okay, is the problem what it seems, or how would you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll oftentimes with families, I talk about doing kind of like digital detoxes or digital like reviews. And so, like Friday nights, like everybody pulls out their phone, mom, dad included, and we all sit down and like, how many hours a day are you spending on your device? Like, where are you spending your time? Make sure that screen time is on for your child. Make sure that you're not allowing your child to download apps that you're not approving. And if you see that they're in areas or on apps that you don't really understand or see the content on, like, okay, identify what it is they're watching and sit down with them and say, like, what is it that you spend, 3 hours on Saturday afternoon on TikTok or whatever the app is that you allow your child to be on, and say, show me, like, what is it that what do you do on here? And have those conversations and talk through kind of what that does for them and whether or not they feel like, it's a positive or a negative for them. Because a lot of times when you have those conversations, the kids identify that it's negative. Like, oh my gosh, like, I wasted 3 hours and I missed going to skating with a friend, or, something else that happened. So, a lot of times the kids know it themselves. So just that, have those conversations without being investigative, and, flashlight in the face or anything like that.
Yeah, you got to take them to the FBI room, close
Right.
the door. Yeah, so so it matches up with the rest of life, I guess, where it's like exploring feelings together. How are you feeling? How does this make you feel? Like that sort of a thing, right? Where they like you said, if they know the thing, but it's like kind of coming to grips with how's this emotionally impacting you? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think during COVID in particular, had a lot of families struggling because even though, I mean, obviously our kids were all kind of amassed onto platforms at the time in order to do their education. But a lot of times those families like, did everything they possibly could to keep them off of like the social apps and things like that to like keep a quote unquote normative, childhood the best they could. But what they didn't do often was take away the news app that is on every phone. And so what we started to see is kids were getting news feeds on like death, murder, and mayhem that was happening
Oh,
out in the real world. Right. And
shoot.
so, it's just,
Yeesh.
and that's like a byproduct of like not really thinking through as a parent. Oh yeah, like we get those news alerts of like all of the things that are happening. Our kids are getting those too. And how's an 11-year-old going to deal with the fact that they just saw a report that 9,000 people died yesterday? Like that's a pretty big
Oh my
issue.
gosh. Right.
So yeah.
I think I totally agree. I commonly suggest to people to look at the tech that they give their kids from the perspective of, if you were to strip it down to nothing so that it had no functionality, like what individual functions would you need to add? And then to take in the tech world, we call it a whitelist approach, where like nothing's allowed except for the things that you add.
Mm-hmm.
Those things go on the whitelist. And to take a whitelist approach, so that, because if you think about it, like you wouldn't add the news app.
Right.
I mean, I guess probably not,
Yeah.
if you've ever seen the news before, you'd be like, oh no, nobody needs to see that,
Right.
I mean, I made a practice for myself. It's been, I don't know, 10 or 15 years of not looking at the news.
Right.
It's
I
great.
recommend
It's
that
wonderful.
too. Yeah.
The news sucks. Like it doesn't actually help me, and it just makes me feel bad. Just
Right.
like algorithms, as it turns out.
Right.
And they're both incentivized in the same way. Okay, so to put you on the spot personally, would you mind talking about how you go about managing technology for yourself and your family, and what failures have you experienced, what successes have you experienced, and like where do you guys land now?
So yeah, I'm not sure if I did it right or not. I definitely was that one mom that, my kids are like, everybody has social media except for me. My daughter did not have it until she was 18. She was a senior in high school. She did she was valedictorian, and she is off at a great school
Wow.
and like done amazing things with the time that she had. And she used technology, for the right purposes for that. And then I have a son who's 17 and a junior. And I gave him a platform starting of this year since his sister went off to college so that they could stay in contact. And I already felt like it was a mistake. And he's a junior. It's like I see the shift in terms of time, and my kids are pretty thoughtful kids who can make eye contact and have conversations with adults and do all of the things. And I don't know if I did the right thing by doing that. I know that they were left out a lot. I'm that parent that was like, I need to know your gun policy and your technology policy before my kid can come to your house. And
Nice.
so
Yeah,
they weren't always
your
invited.
T's and C's.
Right. So, yes. And, of course that was embarrassing to my kids and all of that. But I think that, to me, I say it's like Survivor for parents, like you need somebody on the island with you that that we're going to have these rules and we're going to be on it together. And therefore you're not the only one at the end of the day that's trying to keep your kids from jumping in the sharky waters of social media. So that's what I did, and I looking back, I'm so grateful. Because there's kids that have done a lot of mistakes around my kids that mine didn't. And so, I think that that's the part that as a parent, you don't know how bad it gets until it happens. And I can tell you, I have parents come to me that their kids are suicidal, they're cutting, they're, dropping out of school. They're like, no longer able to function in society because of one post or one picture that they sent. And I could tell a bunch of stories on how bad it gets, but it's just devastating, and you just need it to happen one time. And so I try to be the person who jumps in ahead of it, and say, like, let's start these programs in elementary school. Let's get the parents the help in the schools the help ahead of it. And that's what I've been doing for the last almost 15 years.
It's wonderful. It's so good because if they have at least one or more friends who's on the same journey, it must make it a million times easier.
So much easier.
Social pressure and stuff. So I thank you because this is very relatable. And this is the hardest thing that I often don't really have good answers for people that ask me, my son's a junior. So do I give it to him now? Do I give it to him next year? Do I not give it to him at all? I mean, because at some point he'll have the wherewithal to do it on his own. And as your daughter's gone off to school, maybe the same thing for her, I mean, like you said, they already have some access, but how, and maybe that's the one where there just isn't really an answer per se. Maybe it's just, you can prepare them to the best that you can. And then at some point off they go, and hopefully they've built the skills along the way, and hopefully you've set the examples along the way. But this stuff is so sticky, it's like, man, I don't know. It's really difficult.
I would say that where I see kind of the sweet spot for girls is between sophomore and junior year. They tend to be more mature by that age, and they're kind of past kind of those issues. Boys, I would say between junior and senior year, maybe that summer there, like I would say is probably a safer time to put it in or open it, the floodgates, so to speak. I don't think that there's any redeeming qualities for social media personally. I don't think that it helps them.
Right.
My daughter's had it now for less than a year, and she's like, Mom, it's such a time suck. And I just, I don't enjoy it. And I know what it's doing to my brain, and I just don't want to do it. But of course, she's grown up under me. And my kids have both like really contributed to the Technology Leadership Council program that I have. Like they've helped me develop it and told me, like, listen, like kids need badges and certification, and they need to earn points, and make it fun for them if you want kids to actually like really jump in and like learn as they're going. And so I think that, again, the more kids that we can get in those leadership places and understanding it and helping other kids, I think is where we're going to see that sea change, where those kids aren't going to want it moving forward as much.
Yeah, right. That's
a prayer anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Now, how did you go about, if you don't mind saying, like, which platform does your son have access to? And did you go through some of them have parental controls and stuff like it. Do you mind discussing the details of kind of how you've approached that?
Sure. The only one that I opened up for him was Snapchat because it was the one that he wanted with his friends to be able to communicate. I made a rule that, of course, you don't you invite anyone that you don't know in real life. We tend to sit down and go over all of the different people that he added. I think it took less than a month for him to start having people that were in his feed that I didn't know, and he quote unquote knew but didn't know in person. And so we had to have another conversation about that. You know, grades are a huge issue. What you start to see as a family is like the more time they spend on social media, the less time they spend, in academics and like getting their work done. And so that was a conversation. He was like, yeah, like I'm not really sure if he's in like in an upper level Spanish class. He's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like keep that B. And I was like, well, that's unfortunate because then that means that you don't get to keep your phone. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, the cell phone contract that you signed. And of course I went and got it and showed it to him. And I was like,
here's the evidence.
We agreed to this. And he was like, I can't believe you're being that way. And I said, what way? Holding you accountable to the agreement that we made previously. So,
yeah.
That's awesome. And I'm that parent that's like, I'm not, I hope we're friends in the end. I love you to death, but I'm your parent. And so those hard decisions, I try to bring, and I always tell people, bring your kids along with the story, right? Have them understand what the rules are. And then that way, when the rule gets broken, you can say, gosh, that makes me so sad that rule got broken because now we can't play, or, you've got to be in, in timeout or whatever it was.
Yeah. I love that. That's kind of my style as well. I'm very like, look, no drama here. We had an understanding. We set expectations. That's not what happened. We discuss in advance. If that doesn't happen, then this other thing happens. And so that's what's going to happen now. And right. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. And so, here we go.
Yeah. And kids really appreciate that, I think.
I mean, right. Because it's like, what to expect. Mm-hmm. And I think kids and adults, I'm sure too, thrive with structure, mm-hmm. with expectations, with understandings. Like if we have an understanding, and if you hold, I think there's the most beautiful things that come with boundaries, because if you define the expectation of the boundaries that are going to be put in place, and if the boundaries are violated, then this is what will happen. But then when you do it, then it shows that the personal values that were associated with that thing are in fact important and will be held up, and that the boundaries are held, and that you should have boundaries, and that you can have boundaries, and that let me show you how they take place. Right. So that when they go on their own, they go, oh yeah, I have boundaries and I'm going to exercise them. Like I think about especially young people and like girls, I love the idea of girls having strong boundaries. Mm-hmm. Like, no, that's not for me. That's a hard no kind of deal. I love that, Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I think it's very cool. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And then, so for parents that are listening to this and they're still thinking like, oh boy, this is a lot. If they could do just one thing this week, if they could take one action, what do you think is like the most important thing? If parents are just starting to wade into this world of like, maybe I should reconsider what's going on. Like what's a good action that folks can take?
I think that really assessing like where they are kind of technologically in the family, kind of understanding like how much time is actually spent behind your devices when you're together is like probably the best part. I always, in every podcast I go into, I always offer the host I'll give you a link that gives your listeners like a free book. I wrote Digital Distress, Raising Your Kids Online. Gen Z is the first cohort that we have ever seen. And so I've written a couple books, but the link to the Digital Distress book is it's really helpful to parents. I've had a lot of parents like get the book and write to me and say, I didn't understand that this is what I was seeing. And so I'm happy to like offer that to your listeners, because I think that it's really important to parents that they don't feel alone. And I think that the one thing I would say is like, take a deep breath, what you're doing is the best that you can under any circumstance, and to know that there's $1 trillion industry trying to take you off your best game, and that you're fighting along with a bunch of other parents is important to keep in the back of your mind. So every single day is going to be a different decision and all of those things, but you don't have to do it alone. And there's those of us out there, you, myself, like others that are really trying to like come alongside of you and like help you through this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'll happily share that link to the book. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I'd like to check that out myself.
Yeah.
And so you have this Digital Citizen Academy.
I do.
Can you tell us a bit about that and what resources are available for parents in that?
Yeah, so it's dcakids.org, and that program is my probably Kevin Costner moment where I'm like, okay, what do I do? What can I create to help parents? So I did a K through 12 like online curriculum. It's both on kind of digital citizenry that we like started out in the schools, and now we have K through 12 on AI education and lessons that are bringing kids and parents along that side, as well as a parent resource center, so that if parents have questions or they need help on anything, that they have a resource that they know that they could trust, that only has evidence-based response. And I try to answer every single question that comes through within like 48 hours. Sometimes I'm a little bit delayed, but I do definitely go in and make sure that I'm giving support to the families through that. And then we have that Technology Leadership Council that is, to me, one of my favorites, which is like creating leadership in kids and letting them become the stewards of the space. And then, we do trainings and professional education programs for schools and staff and administrators, because that's where our kids are for 6-7 hours a day. So I want them to feel supported and understand kind of the components that they maybe don't have all the control over, but is influencing their day nonetheless as an academic institution.
That's great. And I love the idea of helping teachers understand what's going on, because they've got enough to deal with. And then there's this whole new pile of crap that's just landed in their classrooms,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
It's a problem. I mean, the problem, I just spoke to 2 different schools and I asked both groups, and there's probably over 300 teachers in total. And two teachers raised their hands that they feel competent with AI and the instructional piece of AI. And that to me is a problem. We've got kids already using it. They're developing things faster than we can even keep pace with. And if we're not getting the teachers that support, then we've got a problem on our hands. So that's a big push on my end.
Man, that's a big one. I want to talk more about AI this year. That's kind of one of my things that I have in my mind to just help people understand, because I've been buried in it myself, trying to learn it. I've probably spent 2,000 to 3,000 hours using AI systems last year alone.
Yeah.
I have, I don't know, about 6 instances of it running right now on my computer behind me.
Wow.
And it's really, really challenging to grapple with. And it's such a moving target, and every day is a different day with it. And it's so, I often think about, technologies have these adoption life cycles. And so in their very earliest phases of a new technology, it's the people that use it are the early adopters. They're the beta testers. They're the people that are okay with problems. Like if a problem occurs, it's fine, no big deal, I get it. And the adoption life cycle is in the shape of a bell curve. And then like top of the middle of the bell curve is, most people have heard of it or something, and a bunch of people are using it. And then on the far right is, your grandparents use it too or something.
Right.
And all the AI stuff, even though it's technically like a few years old, which in current times means, that's a millennia, like it's actually still really brand new, and it's all far left on the technology adoption life cycle. It's all in an early adopter phase. And the trouble is that the problems that occur are not just like error messages that occur on the screen, but rather your brain being programmed by a robot.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like these kids are early adopters, and kids should never be early adopters of technologies, generally speaking,
Right.
especially ones that have psychological impacts, which
Right.
is, there's not very many that fit into that category except for algorithms and AI, which
Right.
are hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting time with this. And I'm really, that's why I want to talk about it more. It's just, it's so difficult.
Yeah.
Um, okay. What question should I have asked you today that I have not asked?
Oh, we've like covered so much ground. I think we've had a
We
lot.
have,
Yeah.
we have.
I mean, I guess like the mental health aspect of technology. I mean, my kind of bailiwick is like the intersection of psychology and technology. I do not pretend to be a technical person in any event, and anyone who knows me knows that. But understanding how it's impacting us as families, as individuals, as corporations, like it just truly is something that I think that we need to look through and understand that they're connected. So when we have highest rates of anxiety and depression that we've ever had in history, and it goes hand in hand with our adoption and use of these platforms, we have to slow down and we have to take a look and say, all right, how do we reconcile that information with what our future decisions are, and how do we as a family do that? And so that's the part that I think I want to give grace to parents on, and for your audience to know that this is that we're learning this as we go. And so it's not something you should have already known, but it's something that we're learning as we go. And now that we know, here's some of the things that we can do in order to kind of slow those things and create a different path for your family. So that's my hope and dream, to help support families.
That's a great way to cap off the conversation. I like that. Thank you very much. So finally, where can people follow you, and where can they learn more about you?
I would just go to dcakids.org. You can find me through that program. I am around on the internet. If they Google my name, they can find me. And like I said, I answer every single question that comes through. So if they have a question, I will definitely get back to them and answer it for them.
Man, cheers to that. That's hard to do. Awesome. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed it, and I appreciate all your insight.
Thanks for having me on, Ben. It's been fun. I appreciate it.